Making ambient music is a lot of fun, and the modular is a great tool for it. But pushing a simple idea to a nice evolving track can be difficult. A good track requires more than just a sound with a massive amount of reverb. Starting with a simple trick or idea and just stacking more layers on top can easily result in an aimless, muddy mess. And progressing to a song too fast has the danger of getting stuck with way too many options and elements without knowing how to control it. In this video, I will give you a simple 4-step guide to create a solid foundation for your ambient journey. It relies on basic concepts and not dedicated effects or expensive specialized tools. You can use regular synths and plugins for all of this just as well, and even apply it to some other genres. And of course, this is just a personal suggestion. There are no rules and you can do anything you like. If you like to support my work or you want to get access to PDF sheets with hundreds of patch ideas I used in my videos, have a look at my Patreon. You can also support my channel through affiliate links in the video description. But now, let's dive right in. It's a good idea to start small and expand from there. Begin with a single sound or layer that inspires you and give yourself space and time to explore it. It doesn't really matter what the sound is you start working with, but stay with it for a while. See what variations for a sound you can come up with and where you can push it. Also, try to avoid drowning it in a lot of effects too fast. I will only use a single reverb in this video. Focusing on core sounds rather than effects can help you find control and your own voice. The idea is to look for and develop a sound that has depth and a set of variations, here represented with letters. These variations can be the foundation of your tracks later. To show what I mean with this, I'll use 3 simple examples: a pad sound, a melodic part, and a sample texture. Let's start with the pad. Here 2 oscillators are used, combined with a mixer and sent through a high and low pass filter. A dual sequencer is used to send 2 different sequences to the oscillators. One is a 3 and the other a 4-step sequence. A gate with a tech-hole decay envelope is used to open the low pass filter. This creates a simple paraphonic pad. Already, just by using the filters, you can create variations. For example, a very driven low sound. Or a wide mid-range sound. Or a thinner high sound. I'll talk more about frequencies later, but to start, just explore sounds and remember variations you can use. You can expand your patch to add sonic variations as much as you like. For example, here a slow random voltage is added modulating the shape of the wavetable oscillator. And the fast LFO, patched through a VCA, is used to modulate the FM input of the other. This allows you to sculpt the sound and add movement or change its character. For example, adding wavetable modulation works great on the low sound. And the FM works great on mid-range and high sounds. In any case, when a module doesn't have an input attenuator, make sure to patch one. It's important you can smoothly blend from one variation to another. By exploring different sounds and settings, you should be able to create a nice set of variations for a single sound. Just to complete the setup, here is a melodic voice with single oscillator, high and low pass filter, sequencer, and a tech decay envelope with a bit of random modulation to its shape. An LFO modulating the filter spread is added, and a random voltage is modulating the frequency of that LFO. Another LFO is modulating the wave shape. All have attenuators, so the sound can easily be morphed. And finally, a simple looping sample is used. It's sent through a bandpass filter, and the smooth random voltage is modulating the playback speed a bit. I use a few simple patches, but of course, if you do have great dedicated modules or effects, you should use them. When you do though, make sure to approach and explore them as another element or variation you can add to a voice, rather than an effect you set and forget. Also, in this video I keep things minimal, with a few sonic variations. But in the exact same way, you can create melodic variations for a sound as well. This just adds more to play with. When you have a set of variations, you don't need to use them all at once. Instead, you can chain them to create an evolving sound. And on the topic of evolving, in this video I make good use of the module I recently designed with ADAC, the Random Bezier Waves. It's a great module for random organic modulation, and you can learn more about it here if you like. An important part of ambient music is storytelling, although you can vary how dynamic you want that to be. There are for sure artists that brought this back to an extreme minimum and like to let their audience just relax in a static bath of sound for a while. But I personally prefer ambient that evolves more. Here is where the exercises from the previous part comes in. Having a sound with a set of variations, you can do more than create a static wall. You can chain a specific set of variations and evolve from one to another. I already gave a few examples with the pad, but the same is possible with the other sounds, as simple as they are. Just using the filter, the melodic part can be pushed back, or brought to the front. Adding modulation, the sound can be given more attention. Or it can be pushed back to a thin texture. The variations allow for development and storytelling within a voice. The same is true with the samples. They can go from static middle of the road to a deep modulated rumble. All the way to a bright, crispy top layer. I prefer to use my hands to orchestrate the bigger picture and control the main evolution in a sound or track. But remember to use slow modulation sources to add depth and interest to your sounds as well. This is done best within certain constraints, meaning these modulations should add slow automated movement to a sound, but not necessarily change its position or role in a track. Here's the example with the pad. A smooth random voltage is modulating the wave shape of one of the oscillators. When done subtle, It can add depth and texture, but it should not completely change the voice. The patch was also set up with an LFO modulating the FM through a VCA. This makes it possible to add another modulation source, changing the modulation depth. Again, this can add subtle texture and movement. Automated modulation like this adds interest to a sound that goes on for a while, making your track nicer to listen to. It also gives you the option to use your hands for the main evolution of a voice or track, while the parts and sounds you don't focus on still have enough depth and movement in the background. By repeating the first two steps, you can work on a few sounds with a set of variations each, and then take the next step. When you want to create entire ambient tracks or performances, you probably want to take multiple sounds and combine them in a single story. I think it's very valuable to approach and deep dive into individual parts and sounds. But the three examples I've been using weren't random. They are three examples that work well together: a moving texture, a slow pad, and a floating repetitive melody. Because of the previous exercises, each of those sounds has a couple of variations that can bring it back and forward, draw more or less attention, be in and out of focus, and so on. This allows you to start sketching out a rough composition. For example, start a track with a present sample texture. Have the pads come in and push the texture back while the pad is in focus. Bring them both back when introducing the melody. Have the melody in focus for a while. Bring the attention of the pad and noise back up, and then have them all calm down to a slow outro. Pay attention that the white parts in the visuals are not necessarily just the volume, as you would see in your DAW or multitrack recording. They represent the presence of a sound, or in other words, how much they should be in focus for the listener. For example, here the noise is the main focus, as it's basically doing a solo intro, carrying the track, but it doesn't have to be loud. That's just an example with my setup, but having a rough concept for the story like this, either just in your head, written down, or as a few quick squiggly lines in your notebook, will help a lot. This is not just to create story and interest for your audience, but also for you to know how and when to use certain variations and achieve a desired effect. If a sound is upfront and in focus, it probably needs some depth and weight to carry the attention. While if a sound is in the background, it should be pleasant without too much effort. By now, you have the variations to do so. You can link these variations to sections of the track. This is just a quick example with some random letters, but you get the idea. For example, you can use a variation with a lot of modulation and depth for the sample part used for the intro, because it needs to carry the track. But you can evolve it into a different variation that's more in the background while the pads are in the center of attention. Maybe you use a bright, low-cut variation for the noise when the melody is the focal point, and so on. Having a few ingredients with variations allows you to shift the attention between the voices. Make a sound shine or use it as a filler in the background and have them work together to tell a story. When you combine multiple layers and sounds, there's always a risk of ending with a muddy mess. I want to share a simple way to think about that. I do want to mention I'm not a mixing and mastering engineer, and if you're interested in creating complex and very layered ambient music, it's worth it to look for creators that tackle that topic with more depth. But when thinking of separation and clarity in your ambient tracks, it can help to divide the frequency spectrum in a few rough sections. For example, the low end, mid-range and high end. If turned on its side, this graph can visualize the presence of a sound in each of those divisions, and you can match it with the visualization of the musical presence made earlier. For example, look at the sample texture. At the start there's no other sound in the track. That does give the option to give the sample a lot of space in the frequency spectrum, allowing it to use all the low, mid and high frequencies however it wants. For example, here a sample texture is set to a low frequency and filtered down to a dark rumbling sound. This might be how you want to open your track, but adding a dark pad on top of this will mud up the sound. Both sounds are now fighting for the same space in the frequency spectrum. So when the pad comes in, there are things you can consider. For example, if the noise must be dark and low, you might want to use a brighter variation of your pads without much low end coming in on top. Or maybe you change the noise to be a thin high-end sound from the start, so you do have space for layering a low pad. Or maybe you make sure you are able to cut the low end of the noise as part of a variation, before or while a low pad comes in. Thinking of the presence of each sound in each stage of the track can help you make decisions when deciding what variation works where in the track. An easy way to make these variations is with a simple mixer that has a 3-band EQ. Don't just set and forget though. You can use a mixer like this as a module or instrument you keep tweaking over time. For example, if I use this channel for the sample, I can have a pretty neutral EQ at the start, but cut the low end of this channel when a deep pad sound comes in, and so on. Within the modular, you can use filters or filter combinations to sculpt the sounds in depth. Having something like a bandpass filter or high and low pass filter in series will allow you to cut frequencies with precision, as I do in this video. Here's a quick example of 3 sounds that all want attention. But filter the high end of the pads, put the melody in place, push the samples to the high end, and things start to fall in place. Here's an example with the sample as a dark sound, the pads in the mid-range, and the melody pushed to a thinner layer. here's a pretty bright sample with thin pads. And this time the melody is made dark. These examples could all be part of the same story or track. You can finish a sketch that both shows the musical focal point for each of the parts, but also where they live in the frequency range. These often go hand in hand. If a pad has more FM or wave-shape modulation, it will often be more present and need more frequency space. If you want that sound to live next to others, they need to be controlled, all giving you more understanding of how to sculpt and push your sounds over time. Following these steps, you will end up with a concept based on a few interesting sounds with variations that can be chained into a track, evolve and tell a story, all while working together. Once you have a solid foundation, you can expand and experiment any way you like. If you'd like to learn more patch ideas, have a look here, and as always, smash that like, subscribe and bell button if you want to see more modular content from me. But that's it for now. Thanks for watching and see you next time.